All right, strap in, everyone, because we are diving deep today into something that honestly sounds like it's straight out of a Tom Clancy thriller. We're talking Houthi hypersonic missiles.
Yeah.
I know you're thinking the Houthis,
Yeah.
hypersonic missiles. That doesn't,
Yep.
like, compute, right?
Right.
But
Oh,
as wild as it sounds, this is the world we're living in now, and it's sending some serious shockwaves, not just through the Middle East, but globally.
it's definitely been a bit of a wake-up call, I think, for a lot of people. I mean, there's been this kind of like this cloud of disbelief, right, hanging over these Houthi claims for years that they had this super advanced technology. I mean, they would even have these public displays of the missiles, but everyone was kind of like, yeah, okay, propaganda, whatever. But then September 15th happened.
Yeah, September 15th. That's the day everything changed, right? That's when a Houthi missile, and this one's called the Palestine II, hit the Gaza power plant in Israel.
Right.
And we're not talking about some little, like, short-range rocket here. This thing traveled over 2,150 kilometers. That's like 1,300 miles.
Yeah.
At Mach 16.
Yeah, and they hit their target too.
Pinpoint accuracy.
Okay.
I mean, it was a serious display of, like, technological muscle that nobody saw coming.
And you can't ignore the symbolism of that name either, right? Palestine too. Like, it's a statement. It's a declaration, I think. It goes way beyond just hitting that one target. It feeds into this whole narrative they're building, this image of the Houthis as a major player on the regional stage.
Right, right, absolutely. But let's, like, rewind for a second. Zoom in on the attack itself. I mean, a missile screaming through the air at 16 times the speed of sound. How does something like that just, like, go undetected? There were U.S. warships in the area, German warships, high-tech radar systems, and yet nothing.
I know. It's one of the most baffling things about this whole event, isn't it? It looks like it flew over the Sinai Peninsula and like a bunch of advanced radar systems just, I don't know, missed it, blew right past them. And then on top of that, you've got Israel. They've got that famous Iron Dome system. They've got Arrow, all this fancy tech, and neither one of them could stop this thing.
Which is pretty shocking, right? I mean, Israel has this reputation, this whole image of having, like, the best missile defense out there, the most sophisticated stuff in the world.
It is.
And at first, they said, no. The missile landed in an open area, no harm, no foul. But then video footage pops up, shows damage to the Gaza power plant.
Oops.
Yeah, oops. So they had to kind of walk back that initial statement.
Well, then they changed their story and said, okay, well, the damage was from like falling debris,
Yeah.
because we successfully intercepted it, obviously.
Right.
But then you look at the pictures, photos from the scene, and it's clear there's impact craters. Like direct hits from the warhead, not scattered debris from an interception. So either their super tech failed or they're trying to downplay how bad it really was. Either way, it makes you wonder about the information coming out of Israel. Makes you think we need to like double check everything.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. But let's shift gears a bit, talk about the Houthis themselves. The image a lot of people have is this, like, ragtag militia up in the mountains of Yemen, fighting with whatever old weapons they can scrounge up. How did they get their hands on technology this advanced? It's mind-boggling.
Yeah. We got to challenge that image, that stereotype, It's not the whole picture. They might not have the factories in the industry to build hypersonic missiles from scratch, that's true. But the Houthis are resourceful, and they've been really focused on getting their hands on better weapons for a long time.
Like, what kind of examples are we talking about here?
Well, think back to 2010. There was this incident. A Yemeni physics teacher got busted selling missile tech to the Houthis. Like, right there, that tells you they were already thinking about this stuff, way back then. And then after they took Sana'a in 2014, they got access to all these government resources, stockpiles, all kinds of things. That definitely helped them move things along.
So they've been, like, strategically building this capacity for a while.
Yeah, exactly. And don't forget, they're good at adapting stuff, too. Like, take their Asif ballistic missile. It's basically a modified Iranian Conqueror missile. They took something they got from someone else and figured out how to make it their own.
So they're not just buying stuff off the shelf. They're reverse engineering, tinkering, actually improving it.
Exactly. That shows you right there that they've got the skills and like the strategic thinking. They're not just happy to have a cool weapon. They want to understand it, tweak it, make it work for them.
That's a really interesting point. Okay, so we've established the Houthis are more advanced than a lot of people give them credit for. But let's get back to the Palestine II. Where did they get the tech to build it? I know some people have pointed fingers at Russia, at China. What do you make of that?
It makes for a good story. Those theories gets people talking, but it's really unlikely if you look at the big picture, the geopolitics, Russia and China, they both have relationships with the official Yemeni government, the one in the south. Giving the Houthis something like that would be a huge risk for them. Could really mess things up in the region.
So process of elimination, we're left with Iran.
Exactly. And there's a lot of evidence pointing that way. Remember the Houthis put out that statement about how they made the solid fuel for the Palestine II themselves? That kind of hints that they got help with the other stuff, the really complicated parts. And guess what? Iran has been making a lot of progress with hypersonic missiles lately.
Oh yeah, they've been showing off their stuff. Like in June 2023, they unveiled the Fatah missile, range of 1,600 kilometers, Mach 13-15. And then November 2023, they roll out an upgraded version, the Fatah II.
Yeah, and we don't know all the details about the Fatah II yet, but it shows you they're not standing still. They're serious about this tech.
And when you put them side by side, the Fatah and the Palestine II, the similarities are, like, kind of hard to miss, both using two-stage solid fuel propulsion, similar ranges. Even visually, there's some resemblance.
The parallels are definitely there. I think it's safe to say Iran had a hand in this, And they're close with the Houthis, so it's not that surprising they'd share this kind of tech.
So here we are, a non-state actor, the Houthis, now has cutting-edge hypersonic missile technology, most likely courtesy of Iran. This is a huge deal, especially for Israel. Their whole defense strategy has been built on this idea that they control the skies, that their heartland is safe. And now that's all up in the air.
It's a whole new ball game now, that's for sure. That attack on the Gaza power plant, it was a calculated move, no question. They waited until minutes after the ceasefire ended. And it showed everyone, not just that they have the tech, but that they know how to use it strategically. For Israel, it's a major reality check. They're facing a threat they just don't have an answer for, at least not yet.
Which brings up a big question. What happens next? What are the consequences for Israel, for their security, and for the broader economy, too?
Well, on the security side, it's exposed a big weakness, right? What Israel's got right now can't handle these hypersonic threats. It's going to take a lot of time and money to develop something that can, and in the meantime, Israel's going to feel vulnerable. So are their citizens, so are investors. That sense of security they've always had, it's shaken. And when that sense of security starts to fade, it can have a domino effect on the economy. People feel less safe, less likely to invest, Businesses might start thinking about packing up, moving somewhere else. Tourism could take a nosedive. We actually saw a little bit of this with the Al-Aqsa flood last year.
Right.
I mean, even though that conflict didn't directly threaten Israel's heartland, the whole vibe, that perception of instability, it led to tourism dropping by something like 80% in the first half of this year compared to last year.
Crazy, right?
Yeah, that's huge. So imagine if this becomes the new normal, this fear of hypersonic missile attacks.
It could cripple them not just from the actual damage that the missiles could cause, but the psychological effect, too. For Israelis, that sense of security, that invincibility they've always felt, it's gone. This attack, it changed everything. And it's not just Israel we have to think about. If the Houthis can pull this off, what's stopping Iran from giving the same tech to Hezbollah?
Man, that's a scary thought. Hezbollah with hypersonic missiles. That could completely rewrite the balance of power in the region. Absolutely. It's a powder keg, The Middle East is already volatile. This could light the fuse for something much bigger with consequences way beyond Israel. This situation, man, it's a tangled web. It makes you question everything we thought we knew about who's got the power in the Middle East.
No kidding. And it highlights a fundamental problem for Israel, their size. Their whole military doctrine has been about hitting first, hitting hard, keeping the fight away from their own people.
The classic offense is the best defense playbook.
Exactly.
But that doesn't really work when your enemy can hit you from 1,000 miles away with basically zero warning. All this missile tech spreading around, especially with Iran seemingly happy to share the love, it changes everything. Israel's small size used to be an advantage, right? Easy to defend, quick to mobilize. Now it's a liability.
So what can they do? What are their options for dealing with this?
That's the million-dollar question. In the short term, they'll probably ramp up intelligence gathering, try to disrupt those supply chains, stop the tech and the parts from getting to the Houthis and Hezbollah, maybe launch some preemptive strikes.
But that's like playing with fire, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've seen how that can backfire, make things worse. It feels like a temporary fix, not a real solution.
Yeah, it's a Band-Aid at best. Long term, they've got to invest in their own hypersonic stuff, both offensive and defensive. And maybe, just maybe, try to talk to Iran, see if there's any way to slow down this whole arms race.
Which brings us to the global picture. What does this mean for the balance of power on the world stage? Things are already pretty tense.
Who knows, right? It's a big unknown. But it feels like we're entering a new era. Hypersonic weapons are going to be a big part of it. The US, Russia, China, they're all pouring money into this tech, and others are going to follow suit. You can bet on that.
It's like we're on the verge of a global hypersonic arms race. And with these things moving so fast, there's no time to think, to react, to de-escalate.
Exactly. The margin for error is tiny, which makes them really dangerous. I mean, think about it. We've already had trouble with traditional arms control treaties trying to keep up with technology. Now with hypersonics, it's going to be 100 times harder to establish any rules, any norms.
So what do? Just sit back and watch this all play out.
We can't afford to be passive. The stakes are too high. We need a new approach, one that focuses on transparency, on talking to each other, on building some trust between these potential adversaries.
That's a tall order, though, especially right now. Trust is in short supply. Everyone's looking out for themselves.
You're right, it won't be easy. It's an uphill battle. But we have to try. The alternative is terrifying. A world where these hypersonic weapons are the go-to solution for every conflict, where any little spark could set off something catastrophic.
Man, this has been a real eye-opener. I mean, we started out kind of skeptical about the Houthis, and now we're talking about a global hypersonic arms race. This tech, it's a game changer. There's no doubt about it, and we're all going to have to figure out how to deal with it.
For sure. This one event, the Houthi attack on the Gaza power plant, it's like it cracked open a whole Pandora's box of issues.
Totally. It's made us question the balance of power in the region.
Yeah.
Rethink arms control, even re-examine the very nature of conflict itself.
Crazy.
It's like someone threw a rock into a pond and the ripples are still spreading out.
Yeah.
And we're just starting to understand the impact. But there's another piece to this that we haven't really touched on, the psychological impact.
You mean the fear factor. Knowing that these weapons are out there so fast, so unstoppable, they create this whole new level of vulnerability, right?
Exactly. Imagine living with that hanging over you, the threat of a hypersonic attack, no warning, no time to react, nowhere to hide.
It's the stuff of nightmares. And that terror, that feeling of helplessness, people can exploit that. They can use it to stir up chaos, undermine governments, manipulate people.
It's not just about the physical destruction, it's about the psychological warfare, creating this atmosphere of fear and anxiety that can paralyze whole societies.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this technology so dangerous, so different. It blurs the lines between traditional warfare and, like, mind games. It creates this unease, this insecurity that can have consequences we can't even predict.
It's like we're living in some dystopian sci-fi movie, the whole world on edge, waiting for the next hypersonic strike, not knowing when or where it's going to hit.
It's a chilling thought, but we can't ignore it. We can't bury our heads in the sand and pretend it's not happening.
So what can we do? What can we do as individuals, as a global community, to deal with this?
First things first, we gotta wake up. We gotta learn about the threats we're facing, understand what's at stake, and hold our leaders accountable.
Be informed, be engaged, push for policies that prioritize diplomacy, de-escalation, not just building more and more weapons.
Exactly. Real security doesn't come from having the biggest stick. It comes from building trust, from cooperating, from respecting each other.
This deep dive, it's been a wild ride. So much to think about, more questions than answers, honestly.
That's the thing about knowledge, isn't it? It opens up more doors than it closes. It makes you think critically, look at things from different angles.
Well said. And on that note, I want to thank you for joining us as we explore this whole Houthi hypersonic missile situation and what it means for the world. We've covered a lot of ground, but this is really just the beginning of the conversation.
It is. And as always, we encourage you to keep digging, keep researching, keep asking questions. The future of warfare, it's being shaped right now, and it's up to all of us to make sure it's a future we can live with.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep diving deep, keep those questions coming, and keep learning.
Yeah, it really is a whole new landscape, you know, and this one event, the Houthis hitting that power plant, it's brought so many things to the surface.
Absolutely. It's like, wow, we got to rethink the power dynamics in the region, what arms control even means anymore. Like, the whole nature of conflict is shifting.
Yeah, like dropping a pebble in a pond and the ripples just keep going.
Exactly. And we're just starting to see how far those ripples reach. But there's this whole other layer, too, that I think we need to unpack a little more. The psychological impact.
You mean like the fear factor?
Mm.
That these weapons are so fast, so unstoppable, that it creates this, like, vulnerability we haven't really dealt with before.
Exactly. Imagine living under that threat all the time. A hypersonic missile could come at any moment. No warning, no time to react, No guarantee of safety.
It's a pretty terrifying thought, and that terror, that feeling of being powerless, people can use that. It can be used to sow chaos, to weaken governments, to manipulate whole populations.
It's not just about the physical damage, right? It's about the psychological warfare, the fear and anxiety that can just paralyze entire societies.
Yeah, that's what makes these weapons so different, so dangerous. It's like, where's the line between regular warfare and just messing with people's minds? It creates this unease, this constant insecurity that could have huge consequences down the line.
I'm starting to feel like we're in one of those dystopian sci-fi movies, Everyone's on edge, waiting for the next attack, not knowing where it's coming from or when.
It's a chilling thought, but we can't just pretend it's not happening. We can't bury our heads in the sand.
So what can we do as individuals, as a global community? What are our options?
Well, awareness is key, right? We got to learn about the threats, understand what's at stake, and demand better from our leaders.
Be informed, be engaged, push for policies that prioritize diplomacy and de-escalation, not just building more and more weapons.
Absolutely. True security doesn't come from having the biggest guns. It comes from building trust, from cooperation, from respecting each other, even when it's hard.
Man, this deep dive, it's been a lot to process. I feel like I've got more questions now than I did when we started.
That's how it should be, right? Knowledge should open up more doors than it closes. It should challenge us to think critically, to question things, to see different perspectives.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And on that note, I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Houthi hypersonic missiles and all the complications that come with them. We've only scratched the surface here, but it's a start.
It is. And as always, we encourage you to keep digging, keep researching, and keep those questions coming. The future of warfare is being shaped right now, and it's up to all of us to make sure it's a future we can actually live with.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep diving deep, keep learning, and stay curious.